The Browns, they're putrid. They're the worst team in the NFL.
The season, the 2024 season is over.
Lamar Jackson can't win the playoffs. He'll win a third MVP, though, so that's great. Drew Sample is the most important piece of the Bengals offense next year.
Go Joe Burrow. He deserves to be MVP. I wish he was the Browns quarterback. I kind of mean that.
If you're looking for the most reactionary, silly, and unserious show on the internet, then you're home. Live from Hamilton, Ohio, it's Off the Bench by Chatterbox Sports on 1410 ESPN Radio.
All right, everybody, good morning. Welcome in Off the Bench, presented by United Dairy Farmers. Justin Kinner with you here, along with Jacob Tissett, who's sitting in the producer chair for Casey, of course. Elliot Rearing holding it back down in the studio as well. Guys, good morning. Welcome. How are we?
Doing great. How are you, Justin?
Not too bad. I gotta love technology.
It's a new look for you. It's a new look for you today.
I like it. That's a good backdrop.
I like the chair. It's not. I mean, it's about as plain as Charlie's backdrop yesterday. I saw you guys talk about that. I thought that was pretty fun.
I can tell you right now, already starting the show, don't like this seat. There's no TVs this way. I can't see Kinner at all unless I'm looking to the side, and that's going to look terrible on a triple box I'm on the entire time. So this will be fun.
He's just got to pretend that basketball hoop is Justin Kinner. That's what he's got to do.
That's right.
So today's show a little different. You'll have me with the guys for the first hour. And then a couple of you will be very, very pleased to know that I will not be with you guys in the back hour. Our guy Trace is going to be coming out of the bullpen. So you guys are prepared. You guys are really pushing and promoting the Golf Stream Challenge. I really, really like that challenge you guys are doing, of course. But my thing is, like, has he had a hole-in-one on this yet, on this simulator? Has he had a hole-in-one to feel this confident to risk $250?
He has won. He has hit one, and it was on a 150-yard hole, he said. Today it's going to be a little shorter. It's going to be about 110, 100. I get to pick the hole. I'm picking the hole. And then if he hits it, I think I have to stay in the office for 72 hours. And then if he doesn't hit it, I get $250. So that's the wager. That's the wager. But I do think Trace is a pretty good golfer, so I'm a little bit concerned.
So do you get to hit it all? Like, you're just there observing?
No, I'm just there to heckle. Well, my plan is to go over there, and once we get to the final 10 minutes, I'm literally going to stand up and cheer. That's what I'm going to do. I'm going to yell in his face, and there's no chance he's going to be able to hit it.
So you would rather stay in the studio for 3 days than pay $250 back to him?
No, but that was against my will. That was to make the deal more worth it for, I guess, him.
Elliot asked for money exchange.
I said I will pay $100 bet, $100. But no, it would be obviously funnier if I stayed in this office and streamed myself stuck here for 72 straight hours.
Yeah, what does the money do for us?
No.
And the thing, so you're going to be live for those 3 days if this happens. And my thing is, we just sit here and just watch you in the studio. What are you are you going to talk?
I don't know.
I'd
imagine once we hit three days that I'd probably stop talking and I'd just sit here,
nap,
and nap. Come out, you have a beard. You have a beard growing.
Yeah, I would listen. Anything's possible. I could get robbed. There could be a robbery in here. I'd have to defend our studio.
I've seen the people that circle that. I've seen the people that kind of roam the streets around the studio. It's very possible, and those windows are creepy. I think at night, you have no clue who's standing outside those windows staring in at you. I'm probably not helping. But,
No, yeah, you're not helping, but thank you.
Bring some sheets, hang them up as curtains.
Yeah.
We need a little privacy.
Man. No, so a couple things we'll get into coming up in a bit. The Reds, they just keep swinging. And the thing is, they just made a huge move yesterday. And, today it seems like people are talking about the move that they almost got done more than the move that they actually got done yesterday. But it was a big move that they got done yesterday that we'll talk about coming up here in a moment. There was a couple pieces out yesterday about the Bengals. Duke Tobin had some interesting things to say about the upcoming offseason. We appreciate Charlie Goldsmith. He came on. He hung out with us yesterday. He had a take that got some people all fired up regarding T. Higgins that I want to recap as well. I thought that was pretty interesting. But again, the futures of T. Higgins in Cincinnati, along with Trey Hendrickson, seem to be the main talking points from the conversation with Duke Tobin, and we'll highlight that. But before we do that, let's just kind of take a look at some of the top headlines kind of around the world of sports. We'll send it to our guy Elliot with Elliot's Headlines.
Score updates, breaking news, local and national headlines, whatever's going on in the world of sports, Elliot has you covered. Off the Bench brings you Elliot's headlines.
Another day where the national headlines, I would say, aren't as abundant as one would like them to be. So we'll start with college basketball. Xavier, unfortunately, they fall on the road to Creighton last night, 86-77. Ryan Conwell led Xavier scorers with 20 points. Fremantle added 16 and 6. And Kalkbrenner for the Blue Jays dropped 29 in their win. Xavier, again, a pretty easy schedule down the stretch. If you could, I hate to say win out, but if you win out, you're going to be in the tournament. I do think they control their destiny to an extent. It's just going to be a little bit more difficult, I would say. Alabama, they hung on to beat Mississippi State on the road, 88-84. Ole Miss, they hung on to defeat Texas, 72-69. UConn, they got back on track with a win over DePaul, 72-61. Number 1, Auburn, they cruised past LSU, 87-74, to match its best start in school history. 6th-ranked Houston, they beat West Virginia, 63-49. And 17th-ranked Wisconsin, they fell on the road to Maryland, 76-68. NBA, 76ers, they win at home against the Kings, 117-104. Maxey logs his 12th straight game with 25 points. The Cavaliers, they crushed the Miami Heat 126-106. The Celtics, they blow out the Bulls 122-100 as Porzingis hits his season high with 34 points. And SGA dropped 52 in the Thunder's 7-point loss to the Warriors last night. Those are some of your scores from last night. The headlines, I guess, are all Reds headlines, which we'll talk about here in a bit. But any other headlines from the world of sports yesterday, gentlemen?
I think Justin had
real quick, you talked about the 76ers in that score right there. Did you guys see this? Like, we talk a lot about Joel Embiid not playing. But since the 76ers drafted him, and I can't remember what year it was, but there has been over 800, almost 900 games have been played since the 76ers have drafted Joel Embiid. And this number came out yesterday. It was kind of a graphic that was put out during the broadcast. I guess Joel Embiid, he has played in 446 games for the 76ers. Now, that may sound like a lot. 446 games. Man, he's won an MVP. He's one of the best bigs in the NBA. But he has played in 446 games. He has missed and sat out over 400 games. He has only played in 47% of the games since being drafted by the 76ers. And people wonder why people are tuning out of the NBA. Some of it's injuries that he can't control. Other of it, some of it is the load management and all that stuff. But he's kind of the poster child, him and Kawhi Leonard, for star players not wanting to play in games or not available to play in games. Whether it's their fault or not, it doesn't matter. It's a bad look for the league. That is a star player who has who's only played in 47%. They have missed more games than they played. That is insane to me when it's all said and done.
Yeah, every league is built on the stars. I think NBA even more so than really any other league. And to have this many great players just sitting out and not playing games, you wonder why people aren't watching the regular season anymore. It's because the players don't care, so why should the fans care?
Yeah, tough. Staying in the NBA, by the way, NBA Commissioner Adam Silver, he has floated out the idea of changing the length of NBA quarters from 12 minutes to 10 minutes. As the league continues to try to find that balance of appeasing the players and appeasing the fans. And I think there's a lot of, it may not sound like much to anybody, only shaving 2 minutes off the time of the quarters, but that's 8 less minutes a game over an 82-game season across the league. I think that's a big deal when you are putting a roster together. But again, this is one of those like, okay, well, let's shorten the games and let's see if that helps with the load management part. I don't think it will, but what do you guys think about the league potentially shortening NBA quarters by 2 minutes?
I don't know why they're so attached to 82 games.
Yeah.
So you're going to shorten it from 12 minutes to 10 minutes. Let's just cut some games off. You don't need to be playing this many games. No one watches for the first 2 months anyway or so, from October until Christmas. And the NFL's taking Christmas now. So I don't know what they need to do, but they can shake up their entire schedule and play less games. That's how you get more people to care and more players to play. And then if you're not playing 82, it's a little easier to regulate how many games people are playing, I think.
Yeah, I listen. If they want to cut it to 10 minutes, that's fine. I don't think that really solves any problems. I think he also mentioned that he would cut if somebody was fouled on a 3-pointer, they'd only get 2 free throws as well. Like, it's just like those fixes aren't really going to help anything. He can try and he can talk about it, but I think the problems, unfortunately, are a little bit deeper than that.
The problem is I don't know how to fix the league because Adam Silver can't look at these athletes and say, "Hey, can you guys care? Can you guys have passion?" Yeah. I mean, he can. It's going to fall on deaf ears. I mean, look, I think we heard some people like Charles Barkley talked about on TNT that there were some little legends that walked into the locker room at the NBA All-Star Game last year and said, "Hey, you know how important the All-Star Game is and how much it means to the fans. Can you go out there and play hard?" And everyone thought that, man, that was going to rally the troops, Larry Bird and others. And it was probably the worst All-Star game in the history of NBA. Like, they don't care. No, even the legends of the game are pleading with them to show respect to the game and play hard, and they're just not. I like the NBA, but I know why people aren't watching. Like, if the players are telling you they don't care, why should I care? That's the thing. You can shorten quarters. You can, make all these rule changes. I just don't think that's going to matter at the end of the day. But either way. Hey, my girl Caitlin Clark, she was actually asked to take part in the NBA three-point contest at the All-Star game. The NBA is relying on Caitlin Clark to come in and help make their All-Star weekend interesting. How about that? But she's too good for the NBA. She declined, and her reason I thought was pretty cool. The WNBA All-Star Game will be held in Indianapolis this upcoming summer, and she said the first three-point contest that she wants to participate in is the three-point contest for the WNBA All-Star Game in Indianapolis. But here's the cool part. Rumors are circulating that Steph Curry might take part in the WNBA All-Star three-point contest along with Caitlin Clark, so I thought that was pretty neat.
That'd be fun. Round of applause to Caitlin Clark, continuing to build up the league that does nothing but try to tear her down.
That's right. That's right.
Kudos to her for helping out the W.
Gotta love it. Next up, Notre Dame set to hire former Rutgers head coach, former Buckeye coach as well, and Chris Ash. Chris Ash is now the new defensive coordinator for the Fighting Irish. How about that?
Yeah, biggest piece of this story, Mike Mickens, Notre Dame DB coach, expected to stay on staff. That's the one a lot of people expected them to promote when Al Golden left. So would have been a big decision if they hired Ash and let Mickens walk to somewhere else. But getting Ash to be your DC, an experienced coach who's done it at the highest level, and then keeping a guy like Mike Mickens on your staff, a great move for Notre Dame. And Al Golden left them with a pretty good foundation. They're going to be just fine.
It's been kind of quiet on the Ohio State defensive coordinator search. I mean, I haven't come across of any name of substance. I still think what we've discussed over the last week, Jacob and Ellie, I do think there might be something there. I don't know if it's going to be Luke Fickell, but I do think it's a name that, I think it's quiet for a reason. I think that you can't put it out there publicly that you're going after a head coach. I think some stuff's being worked on behind the scenes. I still wonder and still think it could potentially be a Luke Fickell thing. We'll see what happens.
That'd be awesome. The silence makes me feel like it's something bigger. I think if they were interviewing position coaches or people in-house, then it'd be a little louder. We'd be hearing about stuff happening. Maybe I'm just being optimistic, but not hearing anything makes me think big.
Absolutely. And then last but not least, out of Major League Baseball, I don't know if you guys saw this, but the Chicago Cubs are adding a very cool new seating feature out in the outfield called the Yard. Okay, it's you could sit. It sits 40 to 50. It said 4 to 50. I don't know if they meant 40 to 50 or if it's just groups of 4 or up to 50. Either way, I don't know if it was a mistype or what, but apparently there's going to be high top seats available. Sits groups of 4 to 50 fans. Ballpark meal included in the price. I just don't know what that price is, but you get unlimited beer, wine, seltzers, and non-alcoholic beverages as well. A pretty cool way to invite people out to the ballpark. I know for the Dragons, when I go to Dragons games, they have a cool feature on the outfield as well. You could buy a table and sit there with a group of 4 friends, and it includes the meal and the drinks and all that. And it's a cool way just to sit with friends, drink, eat, and overlook a ball game out in the outfield. I think that's pretty neat, pretty cool to see that at Wrigley.
Yeah, that is cool. I think any of these, we've talked about it with Great American a lot. They do a great job with it in Cleveland, but getting rid of some of those useless areas of seats, adding standing bars and things like that to just encourage more fans to come. And, honestly, with a high percentage of people at the ballpark these days, watching baseball is second or third or even fourth on their list of things they're trying to do on that given day. So giving, places like that in Wrigley, like some other stadiums have built, hopefully the Reds go that way too and have some more, Budweiser deck is a great start, but some more stuff like that I think would be great for any baseball stadium around the country.
Yeah, standing room only needs to be more utilized in Major League Baseball.
No question.
The stadiums that do it, everybody loves it, so I think it's just part of the game that's, especially too because baseball is one of those sports where people do like to leave early. Not that we're like catering to the people who leave in the 5th inning, but it does give people a reason to be like, if you're downtown, like, oh, I can just stand up in the upper deck, watch a couple innings, and head away.
I don't know what the significance of 13 games is, but I saw the Reds had like a season ticket package for 13 games. You buy season tickets for 13 games, and the sell is like, hey, if you'll have access to postseason tickets if they're available, if the Reds make the postseason. I feel like that's a pretty cool. It's a gamble. I mean, you're investing into that 13 games. Why 13? I don't understand the number. Maybe I should have read the disclaimer. I don't get what the significance of 13 is, to be honest.
It seems kind of random.
It is, but either way. All right. That's just some of the headlines out there, of course, but let's focus our attention on the couple of the teams we talk about and follow the most. The Cincinnati Reds made a move. Look, we spent a lot of time on the Reds yesterday, and we thought that after adding Austin Hayes that, okay, you add Austin Hayes, you ought to get Brady Singer, and you look at Gavin Lux. Obviously, you go out and get Terry Francona. We should just kind of pump the brakes on any excitement of a big splash move being made. I don't know if yesterday's move on top of all those that was announced later in the day is a splash move, but it's definitely the kind of move that got people to buy in and be more excited. We'll talk about the move and the addition of Taylor Rogers being added, star lefty pitcher from the Giants. We'll talk about that when we come back. But also there was another deal that the Reds were close to getting done, or at least in the midst of getting done, but there was just a hold up on it. People seem to be talking a lot about that as well. We'll get to all that and more when we come back, and we're off the bench next. All right, and we are back. This is Off the Bench, presented by United Dairy Farmers. Justin Kinner, Jacob Tissa, Elliot Rearing with you. Shout out to our guy Casey. He's out working another project right now. He's hanging out with Reed. They're knocking some stuff out. So Jacob's in the producer chair. I'm in Youngstown. I'm with Wright State, where they're playing, obviously, Youngstown State later on tonight. And then Elliot holding it down in the middle, sitting by himself with no one to his left or right. But that's okay.
I don't like being this far away from Elliot.
I don't like
disconnect.
Yeah, I don't like seeing Jacob's two eyes. I can only see his eyes above that computer, so it's a little bit of a different dynamic. But that's okay. That's okay. We're adjusting.
All right. So the Reds, look, we talked a lot about them yesterday. We talked we spent time on this already. National media is super high on what the Reds have done. We just seem to be a little bit behind on the optimism and excitement because I think we were expecting a little bit more. I think we've been waiting on that splash move, and I don't think that splash move is coming. But I do think when you add all the pieces together that, they've added, I do think it's a significantly better ball club than a year ago at this time, and we probably should. But that was the conversation at this point yesterday. But since then, the Reds have made a couple more additions, and the most notable one, of course, being Taylor Rogers. And I'll send it to you guys on this. We talked about it with Charlie Goldsmith yesterday. We keep talking about the outfield, and we keep talking about, like, the bigger names that we want to see. But one thing we haven't spent time on at all is the bullpen. They add Brady Singer to the rotation. Obviously, you look at the fact that, they do the qualifying offer and bring him back. So I'm just kind of curious your thoughts. They finally addressed the bullpen. They bring Rogers over. Where are you guys at with this type of move? Is this the type of move that finally gets you to say, okay, you have my attention. I'm ready to buy in now?
Yeah, I think everyone was focused on bats and outfield bats, but bullpen was a big need. And getting a guy like Rogers for half of his contract for basically nothing prospect-wise, all due respect to whoever we traded. But this is a great move for the Reds, and it seems like they're trying to, spin the tires on stuff. Even if they did miss out on some of the big guys in free agency, they're trying to add where they can. And I think that's, something that we should applaud.
We discussed it with Charlie yesterday. Was that yesterday? God, my days are all confused. We discussed it with Charlie Goldsmith, and we brought up the bullpen. I thought it was a serious area of concern that hasn't really been talked about at all this offseason. We've talked about the outfielder. We've talked about guys like Gavin Lux. We've talked about starting pitching, bringing in Brady Singer. We've talked about the defense. We've talked about just about everything except for the bullpen and what that's going to look like this year, because I think there are so many question marks. And yesterday, surely enough, they make several, I would say, sizable moves. I know people are going to, not discuss the Ian Jabot thing seriously, and that's fine. I'm not the biggest Ian Jabot guy in the world, but I might be the biggest Ian Jabot guy in the world.
I think you are.
But Ian Jabot was a solid piece for the Reds. I mean, he ate as many innings as one could possibly eat. while also pitching at a serviceable level. And then you bring in Taylor Rogers, who I think is really one of the game's, best relievers. Last year with the Giants, 2.4 ERA in 64 games. That's 60 innings pitched. He was an all-star, 4 years ago? I think this guy is pretty damn solid, and especially for what this bullpen is. And that's a bullpen that's probably young, not a lot of star names. This is a veteran relief pitcher who's going to be able to come in clutch situations towards the end of the game and get the job done. That's a big piece. You lose Fernando Cruz, you lose your eighth inning guy, and I think you just found your new one in Taylor Rogers.
Yeah, and then the other signing they made yesterday, Wade Miley in the minor leagues. We talked about it yesterday on the show. It happened while we were live, but I think that's another underrated move that'll get brushed under the rug with a lot of the other things happening. Getting a guy like that I know he's battling back from Tommy John, and we probably remember him a little bit more fondly than the other 29 teams in the MLB because of that no-hitter, but I think having a guy like Wade Miley in your minor leagues, waiting to come up, being a depth piece for the starting rotation, I think that's just as crucial as a lot of the other things we've done this season.
One thing I remember we talked a lot about last year, or at least coming out of the season, was like, okay, the exciting part about the Reds was just the youth and the youth movement there. But then, Joey Votto, when he retired, that was the veteran that we talked about the most. But there was no veteran leadership with that group last year at all. No guys to show the young guys how to go out and get it done. We're looking for the big names. They're not there. But the fact that you get a Brady Singer who's been around for a while, the fact that you get, Austin Hayes, who's a veteran outfielder, like, the one thing that you could tell as being an emphasis on this team is, yes, improving a lot of the deficiencies from last year, but they're giving Terry Francona, an experienced manager, experienced veteran players, and I think that's going to go a long way as well. We want the big names. I completely get it. But I do think the experience on top of the replacement players they've got is pretty good.
Yeah, I would say so. And, again, I don't know who was the guy. Do we know anything about the guy that we traded? I think he was just.
I didn't.
Yeah, I don't know anything about him. We got another guy too today that I wish I knew who he was. But yeah, good for the Reds. Good for the Cincinnati Reds. They look to be competitive next year. I think it's funny how 2 days ago I gave the Reds, I think, a C-. Since then they've made like 5 moves.
Yeah.
So back up to a B. We're up to a B. They've improved. They've absolutely improved the roster. So. Good for the Reds.
I'll throw the grenade. What's the grade if they get Luis Robert?
We go up to an A.
Yeah, I thought that was the answer.
We go up to an A, and we're going to be all the way back in. It was Albert Abreu, by the way. They just signed to a minor league deal as of 30 minutes ago. Has been in the league for a couple years. I don't know if he's going to actually contribute to this club a ton, but another signing nonetheless. So Nick Krall still working at it. Still absolutely working at it.
Year after year, offseason after offseason, everyone just sits back and gets crawled, and month after month. So, they just let him cook.
It's funny, and by the way, get crawled was an insult all last season. Everyone just kept, oh man, they got crawled. I think getting crawled right now is actually almost like a sign of optimism. Like all these teams getting crawled. Look. And the Austin Hayes deal, by the way, we do find out. The pitcher that they got yesterday in Rogers, we do find out as well. Like he had a $12 million price tag, and they're willing to pay. Sending him over, they're going to pay $6 million of that. So the Reds are getting that experienced bullpen piece for only $6 million. So they saved that right there. But that's what the Reds are doing. They're taking advantage of some price dump players around the league. Completely get that. But the move that they didn't make yesterday, you just brought the name up a little bit ago, Jacob, but the Reds were, I guess, close, according to a couple MLB reporters out there, but they just couldn't agree on the money and they couldn't agree on the players. But I think the story there was the Reds were trying to swing for the fences, whatever that means, because, again, you can be kicking the tires on it, but how aggressive are you willing to be? This was the first time we heard of a player, a top prospect for the Reds, that they were willing to move on from. Edwin Arroyo was a name that was being thrown around in a trade with the White Sox, but the deal couldn't be done because of money. But I thought the biggest takeaway from that is, yes, they're going after a big name, but secondly, they were willing to part ways with a top prospect, something that we felt like they weren't willing to do for the longest time.
Yeah, and I think that's the biggest thing. I said earlier this offseason that I was done giving Reds the credit for being in on these big guys. They have to actually do something, but there's a little bit more meat on this Luis Robert bone than there was on the Teoscar Hernandez or Anthony Santander when they just kind of threw the Reds names in there with a list of the Yankees and the Dodgers and the Blue Jays and whoever else to sign these guys. And though we were in the mix in the last 5 or whatever, I never really thought we had a chance. This one feels like it was close. I mean, Ken Rosenthal reporting that it came down to just money, and I mean that's about as close as you can get. And it's a pretty frustrating spot to be if you're a Reds fan to hear that money is a potential hang-up when you're not really paying a whole lot of people and you have a chance to get someone who could be a real star, a real big addition for the next 3 years. This is a multi-year contract with Luis Robert, so I think it would be a perfect move for the Reds. If it was prospects and value you're giving up for it, that's a different story. If it came down to money and the Reds were hung up on $15 million versus $25 million or whatever the difference was, that's a really tough pill to swallow. But until we know for sure, I am going to give the Reds some credit for being in on Luis Robert, just for spinning the tires after missing out on those big outfielders. This is what I said yesterday, and we clipped it up and tweeted it, and some people agreed and some people didn't. But I said Austin Hayes is a signing you make to be a depth piece when you need the outfielders the Reds need. And if they went and got Luis Robert, maybe that would have done away with the Austin Hayes signing. But in theory, that still applies. You go get your star, and then you have another guy to help fill some depth roles. So I think Luis Robert would be awesome. I know there's injury concerns, which there are with a lot of the Reds organization, but there's not often that you can get a guy like that for a couple prospects, at least his ceiling. So I would be thrilled.
Now, Austin Hayes still has yet to be officially signed, right?
Right, and
so we're still waiting for it.
That's the thought process. In Rosenthal's article, he said the Reds shifted from Robert to Austin Hayes when those conversations started to deteriorate. So without the official announcement, I guess maybe we're still waiting on potentially being back in on Robert. But people did point out that Carlos Estevez, the reliever from the Phillies that we were connected to, he signed a contract right after we signed or traded for Taylor Rogers.
Yeah.
And the combined value of Hayes and Rogers equaled basically what Estevez made. So the thought process there a lot of people are having is, are the Reds potentially maxed out? And they were using those funds on one of those two places. And when they found the Rogers-Hayes versus the just Estevez or just Luis Robert, they preferred the 2 to the 1. So not entirely sure where the truth is in that, but I mean, at least something to watch until they officially announce Austin Hayes.
It looks like it's a 6-year, $50 million deal for Robert with a 26 and 27 team option. I don't know, like, if that's the number, that's what? I mean, that's not that much money, I don't think.
I think he came out to like $20 million a year for the last 3 years.
Okay, so it is pushed to the back. All right, that makes more sense. Anyway, Robert's, listen, I mean, last year played 100 games, wasn't the best player in the world. I would say probably his worst year maybe as a big leaguer. But the year before that, I mean, he's an all-star. You hit 38 home runs for the White Sox. You play 145 games. This is a guy that does have injury concerns. He played pretty much a full season in 2020 and pretty much a full season in 2023. Outside of those two, he's gotten 3 seasons with, I would say, an incomplete on those seasons. So it is an area of concern where, as a guy who preaches constantly that the Reds have to be healthy, they have to be available to play for the entirety of this season, it certainly is a risk. My argument to that would be Edwin Arroyo would play probably 0 games this year. So, you know.
And next.
And maybe next. And also, I don't know where Edwin Arroyo plans to play if Matt McClain and Ellie De La Cruz are the middle infielders. Maybe he plays third base. I don't know.
I do think he's the best position player prospect we have. And I don't even know if that's like a take. I think it's more of a fact. And that might be a tough thing to swallow if you're where the Reds are at. And with the comments we've seen coming out about re-signing Ellie, I know that's a long way down the line. And I know Charlie Goldsmith said it's the most tired topic in Reds radio right now. But you might want to look at holding on to some of those younger middle infielders if you know 4 years down the line you're not going to have Ellie De La Cruz at shortstop. So I don't know how much that's coming into play, but I would also argue if you know you aren't going to re-sign Ellie, trade everyone and go all in on a 3 or 4 year window because it's the best chance you're going to have. So I see both ends of the coin.
Craig did confirm $15 million this year with 2 club options for $20 million each of the next 2 years. So hypothetically, they could, just not opt in. If they wanted to.
If you're going to give up an Arroyo, then you would certainly opt in.
Yeah. Correct.
Yeah.
Unless they win a World Series, who knows?
Or extend.
Yeah. I listen. It's an exciting move. I hope the Reds don't give up on it because I would like to see it. It would be a move that brings me all the way back. It's that outfielder that we all hoped. Again, you're betting on a guy to be healthy, but at the end of the day, you're betting that with every single one of your other players too. So I don't think it's that crazy of a deal. I wouldn't hate it. I would welcome it, and I'm hoping Nick Kroll has got a little bit more magic up his sleeve. I think yesterday we were talking about it, and Kinner kind of brought it up before the segment. It's like, that big splash, is it ever going to come? Slowly but surely, we're getting all these little big splashes here, medium-sized splashes, and it's making me very excited for the Reds season because I don't think they're done. I don't think they're done yet, and I think there's a couple more moves left to be made. We'll see if they can close this Robert thing or we can actually sign Austin Hayes. Either way, the Reds have done an impressive job at improving their roster. I saw that yesterday on Twitter. I was looking around X.com. Shout out X. It's all happening on X.
It is.
And I saw our good friend Obscure Reds, he started tweeting out, why are people so upset? Why are people so frustrated? They've objectively improved their roster, and they have. Up until the past couple of days, though, they hadn't really addressed some big areas of this team. Now they have. You bring in Taylor Rogers to help the bullpen. You bring in Austin Hayes or whoever they get for the outfield. You bring in Ian Jabot. You bring in Wade Miley. You bring in a bunch of these guys that are going to have depth for this team. And I don't know. I'm starting to talk myself into the playoffs. If we can get one more, I'm going to start talking myself into it. I'm not there yet, but I'm really, really close.
Is 2025 the year of optimistic Elliott?
It might be. It might just have to be.
Is the world ready for that?
No, I don't think so. I don't think the
if
world's
you and
ready
Nick
for it.
Kirby combine forces to support the Reds, it might be over.
Listen, if Kirby and I both were positive, the world might burn. I don't know what would happen. The sun would explode.
We'd win a World Series.
Yeah, probably. Tyler says, Elliot, do I still want Taylor Ward? Sure, I would love Taylor Ward. If the price is as cheap as what I read about on X.com, I think they were giving that guy away. So, yeah, I'd love Taylor Ward. Now, if you're going to get Luis Robert, is it Robert or Robert? It's killing me. It's killing me
I've
that I
been
don't
saying
know.
Roberts.
Yeah,
I will learn.
I'm going to go back to Robert. You stick with Robert. One of us has to be right.
I would say I'll learn it if we get him.
We have to pay attention. Anyway, Luis Robert, I would love him. I would absolutely love him. So if you're going to get him, Taylor Ward, one more outfielder, I think that's what you need. We're one more outfielder away from having a pretty complete roster. So good for Nick Kroll, man. I had my doubts on Nick Kroll, and every single time he seemingly shuts me up.
All right, well, we're going to step away for a few moments. We'll pick up with this. We'll transition over to the Bengals coming up here in a bit as well. More Off the Bench presented by United Dairy Farmers when we come back. It's presented by United Dairy Farmers, Chatterbox Sports on YouTube, and ESPN 1410 Wing AM in Dayton. I had to switch cameras real quick, but we're rolling, right? Everything good? We're good?
We're great.
Looks good
now
to
it's
me.
now it's all off a little, like but it's
Got a
okay,
podium.
Yeah. But continuing on. By the way, I've always said Luis Roberts as well. So when you said Robert earlier, I'm like, damn, have I been saying it?
There's definitely no S.
So it's just Luis Robert.
It's
What's
Robert.
his number? I'll just call him by his number.
8.
8.
Number 8 for the White Sox. Yes, there you go. But no, Jake, you brought this up a little bit ago too. It's like one of those where like we've all been told basically the Reds are not going to be able to most likely afford this. Something could change, yes, with Ellie De La Cruz. But if we know that, because the other part is, okay, if there's a chance the Reds could keep him, maybe they're going to be a little frugal with their money and maybe not try to spend it all over the place. But if they're trying to save money to be able to get the deal done, okay, I could understand that. But if you're telling us you can't afford them, then you might as well spend the money elsewhere to take advantage of the window. Don't tell us how important this window is and then not show it. But I don't think it's the time to be negative because if our guy Elliott's going to be positive, I think we all need to feed off that and ride that Elliott positivity train while we can. And by the way, Elliott, just so you know, I've never really thought you've been super negative. I don't think this Reds team necessarily has done enough over our lifetimes to really earn the overly optimistic approach that a lot of people and some people have, like Kirby. I respect the hell out of that because he balances us all out, and I think that's needed, to be honest with you. But no, I never apologize for being negative. But if you're being positive, it makes me feel positive that there's something to be excited about. I just feel like, the Reds, too, like it was silent for a while. They get Terry Francona, and then they get the Brady Singer deal, and we're like, all right, well, maybe that's it. Maybe, but why do you think all of a sudden, why now is all of a sudden the Reds just move? Are they just taking advantage of the fact that spring training's about to start? So some of these players, they're antsy to get a deal done. Some of these teams are now more willing to move off of guys late January with spring training about to start than maybe back in December.
Yeah, I think that plays a part of it. I also think that the Reds were taking their time. You don't want to rush and make all these moves immediately. You want to take your time, slow things down, look at what you got. And right now the Reds are paying attention to the other aspects of this team that, again, I thought they were ignoring it. They weren't ignoring it. They were just waiting. And yeah, certainly I do think that, we talk about why don't the Reds make a ton of moves at the deadline. It's because you're playing from with a bad hand, right? You have a bad hand in front of you because you're playing out of desperation. Right now, it's the complete opposite. You've got the leverage. Once we have the period right before the spring season. So these guys want to get deals done. They want to be on teams. They want to start looking for new houses. They want to start, getting ready for this next season. And whether that be in Cincinnati or wherever, they're all trying to get these deals done as quickly as possible. I think that plays a part into it. But I'm happy that it's happening. And if the Reds are using this entire period to sign guys, that's doing their job. So good on Nick Kroll.
I think we kind of talked about this earlier in the offseason, too, when talking about some of the big names that we wanted. It was always going to be in the Reds' best interest to let some of those dominoes fall and kind of see where everything's at and then attack where they found that they could. The Reds were never going to do themselves any good getting in a bidding war for Teoscar Hernandez with the Dodgers. But sitting and waiting for him to sign and having some people below him fall to you, that's how the Reds are going to succeed. Now, you just have to hit on some of those mid-level signings. If Austin Hayes can be 2023 Austin Hayes, that's a phenomenal deal, and the Reds are probably on the doorstep of the playoffs. Now, if he's 2024 Austin Hayes, then they're the same as they were last year. And I think that's what a lot of these signings are for the Reds, are high upside, playoff level upside, and then if they are what they've been at some different points in their career, then maybe this team doesn't improve much at all. But I also don't think that's a terrible place for the Reds to be. We'd obviously like the bona fide all-stars, but I think getting guys that have a chance to get into a locker room with Terry Francona, with a young core of Elly De La Cruz and Matt McClain, and really pick it up. This is a fun place to play. This is a really entertaining team when they're winning games. This was America's team 2 years ago when they were ripping off wins and trying to get to the playoffs. So I think if this team can start winning, we'll see a lot of the guys that they've added and a lot of guys that are on this team in general play more towards the top ends of their career, and maybe that's just optimistic, but I also feel like that's something you get out of Terry Francona.
America's team. That was an exciting month. That was an exciting month of baseball to be America's team. Last point on this before we move over to the Bengals. People always think to the offseason, to make your roster better ends like spring training right when the season starts and all this. To me, I feel like the offseason is once the season starts, it's no longer the offseason, but the window to improve your team. The other thing is, a lot of people freaking out, hey, the season's here. I guess this is the roster we're playing with. I think the window that the Reds should, I don't know if the Reds should make another big move between now and when the season starts. I do think you've made a lot of different moves at this point. I would let the dust settle on not what's available around the league, but what you have on your roster. You've made a ton of moves. You've added a lot of veteran leadership. You have one of the best managers in baseball. Let's see what this team can do in April, May, and June. And if you want to move on from an Edwin Arroyo, I think you hold on to him until the trade deadline. I think the trade deadline is something that the Reds need to be patient and wait till. If they want to make a big splash move, I get we want it now, but at the same time, if the Reds can get off to a hot start, if the Reds could be one of the top teams in the Central, if the Reds could just be remember how bad the National League was last year? Remember how just almost every team except for two was out of the playoff race by the time we even got to July? I think the Reds should kind of sit and see what they have for a little bit and then assess where their needs actually are, because maybe the outfield does play really well. Maybe, Steer is great out there along with Austin Hayes and along with the depth if these guys are healthy. Maybe all of a sudden there's a ton of depth at third base, and now all of a sudden we're moving pieces between, you with Trevino there, you could play a little bit more of Tyler Stevenson at first and obviously Christian Encarnacion Strand, and then reassess to see, okay, if we're going to move on from an Arroyo, it better be something that is going to not just benefit us a couple years down the road, but give us that window, take advantage of something to go try to win and get into the playoffs this season. So just because they don't make another move between now and the start of the season doesn't mean that this team's done making moves for this season. I think the trade deadline could be the next window where this team decides to add that big piece that we've been waiting for.
But at the same time, you look at the first 20 games of the schedule, it's a gauntlet. You start with the Giants.
I haven't. What is it? I haven't really looked at it yet. Is it bad?
So you start with the Giants, that's a winnable series. You can beat the Giants at home, especially. You then play the Rangers. You play 3 games with the Rangers, sorry. Then you travel to Milwaukee for 4 games.
We always do well there.
You travel back out. You travel back out west to San Francisco right away. You play the Giants twice in the first 2 weeks. And then you have the Pirates at home, Mariners at home, Orioles on the road. Like those aren't. Sir, you can survive that and maybe even have a winning record, but that is a pretty tough beginning stretch of the schedule. So I would like that waiting until the trade deadline thing. I don't know if that really plays. And also, I keep bringing it up. You're playing out of desperation, and teams know that. So you're going to have to give up more and more when you're trying to acquire big name talent at the deadline. Maybe you can acquire somebody trying to dump someone, but I doubt that. That's a risk when you're playing with an 162 game season. I'd rather start with that guy now. And yeah, to your point, I don't know if they need a big move anymore. I don't know if they need a guy that is like Luis Robert and can hit 38 home runs with the Reds. I'd like that. I want that to happen. But I don't think they need it because you still have a bunch of guys that have to prove it this year. You have a bunch of guys that you don't exactly know what you have. Maybe CES is that guy. Maybe CES is that 40 home run guy that everybody likes to talk about. Maybe Gavin Lux is going to contribute more than we think out in the outfield or third base, wherever he's going to be platooning at. Jamier Candelario is a name that we continue to say as of late, and it's because we don't know what we have with Jamier. Last year, it went downhill, but he did show signs of immense power right before the injury and before he kind of lost it down the stretch. So there's a bunch of guys that if they are still playing up to what we believe that they are, this is a playoff team. It's just you're betting right now that they're going to be that, opposed to betting on bringing in somebody else, a veteran bat, a veteran arm from elsewhere, and bringing them here. But with the addition of Taylor Rogers, with the additions that they've made this offseason, I do think they've done enough to say that they are trying. They are competitive. With the amount of money that they have, I think Nick Kral's done an admirable job at making the Reds at least competitive for the NL Central.
Yeah. They're objectively better. And I think that's the biggest thing about being in January 30th, still a long way to go this offseason. Getting better by this point in the offseason is huge. I don't know how many times the Reds have gotten better between the end of the season and January in my life. Usually it's all at the end picking up the scraps. Not that there hasn't been some scraps involved here, but it's been great to see these moves, being proactive to try to improve the roster. Mr. Mo, he's been a member for 14 months. He put this in the chat. I don't know. These aren't super chats. What are they called? Member chats?
Member chats.
Member chats. Mr. Mo's been a member for 14 months. I think he hit the nail on the head for what we're talking about here. He said the most exciting part of Reds season is always right before spring training. It's just enough time for our heart to heal from the last season. Then we talk ourselves into optimism, fully prepared to be hurt again. And I think he's right. We realize how brutal it is to be a Reds fan until about mid-January, and then the Reds make some signings, and oh boy, we're going to the playoffs again. So we'll see what happens in mid-May.
All right, let's switch over to that other team in Cincinnati that's also has a lot of questions. I mean, by the way, Charlie Goldsmith, if he thinks the LA De La Cruz conversation is tired, I mean, how has the T. Higgins conversation not put people to sleep at this point? But we're about to start that up again, like in literally 1 minute. So we'll step away for a few minutes. I'll throw this more likely scenario to you guys as we head into this next part of the show. Who's more likely to be a Bengal in 2025, T. Higgins or Trey Hendrickson? Which of those two is more likely to be a Bengal this upcoming season? We'll discuss that when we come back. More Off the Bench next. Off the Bench, presented by United Dairy Farmers. Justin Kinner, Elliot Rearing, Jacob Tissett, and the producer chair for Casey. Trace Fowler going to jump in for me. I'm on here in about 15 minutes. I'm in Youngstown State, calling the game for Wright State tonight, so I'm trying to do as much of the show as I can. I have other obligations I have to jump over to quick, so appreciate you guys letting me kind of balance that out, nonetheless. Even though you didn't really let me, I just told you what's going on. But anyways, it's besides the point. I'm assuming you let me. Whatever. Which of these two Bengals players who we're going to be talking a lot about as the offseason just continued, and by the way, it's not the offseason yet, Super Bowl. Hey, look, technically the Reds made their biggest offseason move when the season was still going on. They added Terry Francona before we even got to the World Series. So, maybe the Bengals have a big move up their sleeve. Who knows? But T. Higgins, a lot of question marks about his future in Cincinnati. And obviously the same with Trey Hendrickson. Trey Hendrickson, T. Higgins, which of those two is more likely to be a Bengal in 2025?
I'm going to take a cheat code answer.
Yeah, I think this is pretty easy.
I'm going to say both.
Oh.
I'm going to say both.
Okay.
I'm going to say both. And I'm going to take the cheat code answer. They have enough money. They have enough cap available to them to pay them both, while also signing Jamar Chase. The Bengals have enough to do that. Will they do it? I don't know. I would like to think they will, because Trey Hendrickson is such a large part of the defense. Letting him walk, and he's signed too, right? I mean, he's one of
the, he's under contract next.
So it's like I don't think that there's going to be some major drama after last year, or like last year, excuse me. I know Trey's coming off a career year. You lead the league in sacks. You're going to want more money. I understand all of it. The Bengals have enough money to pay these guys. Not to mention, you're going to probably work at the draft harder than you've ever worked this year to find ready now available talent that we can at least supplement a little bit on the defense. So you're going to have guys while also trying to go out and get a couple minor free agents. I have a hard time believing they're going to go out and sign somebody major, given the fact that we do need to bring back T. Higgins and Trey Hendrickson and sign Jamar Chase. I know all that. I don't think the Bengals are going to let them go. I have a hard time believing. We have no idea what this offense looks like without T. Higgins. Zero. And based on what we have behind T. Higgins, no disrespect to Yoshi or Charlie Jones or whoever's back there at this moment, we need him. You need him, and if you don't have T. Higgins, a wide receiver in the first round has to be a must. You have to get a wide receiver first, because we don't know what this offense looks like without a number two, arguably two number one wide receivers. Trey Hendrickson, again, I'd make the argument that if you don't have him, you can survive, given the fact that we had him last year and it didn't exactly help a ton either. But I don't think the Bengals are just going to let this guy walk. I think they're going to bring them both back.
I think the answer between who's more likely to be a Bengal next year is Trey Hendrickson, just because he's under contract. I would say it's probably about 60-40 that we re-sign T in my mind. I think it's more likely than not, but I just don't think there's any chance Trey Hendrickson's not a Bengal next year. So I think it's most likely that Trey's a Bengal. The question with Trey Hendrickson is how dirty does it get? How ugly does this offseason get? Is there another retirement threat? Is there another trade request? I don't entirely know what to expect, but I'm definitely worried about this offseason with Trey Hendrickson, really more than I am with Jamar or T. I expect Jamar to get done relatively easily. I know Justin Jefferson's something a lot of people are likening it to, how that got pretty ugly at the end. Well, they still got it done without really having any real problems other than Twitter people tracking flights and breakfast locations. So at the worst case scenario, I think it's going to be like that, and the Bengals will get it done by the time they have to get it done. And T. Higgins, I think, could go the other way, and he could be playing somewhere else. And no matter how ugly Trey Hendrickson makes it, I'm pretty confident he'll be playing for the Bengals next year. But long term, I wouldn't say I'm entirely confident about either of them, T or Trey, being a Bengal. Trey Hendrickson's age, when you're going to rebuild the entire defense, makes it somewhat of a question of whether or not to extend him long term, regardless of how good he is. And then obviously we've had the debate time and time again about two number one wide receivers and whether or not you should pay him. I do think next Sunday is big for us. If the Eagles can win the Super Bowl paying two number one wide receivers, I think that might make your decision a little bit easier. You have a data point that you can point to and say they've done it, instead of the Chiefs who've traded away number one receiver after number one receiver and still gotten to the Super Bowl. So I would love to sign them both, but if you have to say which one's most likely, I think T's most likely to leave.
So Kelsey Conway put out a couple pieces yesterday that's been picked up and making its rounds about a conversation that, with Duke Tobin. And And Elliot, you're right. Like they have that's the crazy thing about this. We talk about the salary cap and the cap space that they have. They have plenty. They have a lot of money that they could spend, especially when we talked about the cut casualties that obviously haven't got to that point yet. But that money, it's going to free up a lot of money. They have the money to get it done. It's just a matter of will they do it. Some of these quotes out of this Kelsey Conway article and the conversation she had with Duke Tobin, I don't know if it makes people feel all warm and fuzzy inside. I saw a lot of negativity on social media yesterday when it came to this article from Kelsey Conway. One of the quotes about both Trey Hendrickson and T. Higgins, Duke Tobin says, "We feel like we have the resources to do it," kind of like what Elliot was referring to. He goes, "But it all depends on how the negotiation goes. And here's where it gets interesting. And whether they're willing to accept wanting to come back at a number that makes sense for everybody." And let's be clear. That quote right there bothers me because when Duke Tobin says, well, it needs to make sense for everybody, what you're saying is it needs to make sense for us. Because when he says wanting to come back at a number that makes sense for everybody, it's about them wanting to come back at a number that makes sense for the Bengals. And as I've said before, Jamar Chase is about to be the highest paid wide receiver in football. Joe Burrow's the second highest paid quarterback in football. They're saying T is a need. They're going to take every dollar they have coming to them. Why should T have to take a number that is good for the Bengals when they keep talking about how much of a need he is? The other thing about T. Higgins, Joe Burrow has called T. Higgins a need. Obviously, Jamar Chase has talked about how much he's in need. Has anyone else in the organization talked about how much of a need he is? That's not a shot at T. I'm just saying these quotes don't really make you feel like they are overly stating, man, T is in need and we need to get this done. They did say, obviously, Jamar Chase is their top priority this offseason.
Yeah, I think the conversation around T taking a pay cut isn't necessarily what they were saying there, and maybe I'm just being optimistic as a Bengals fan, but I feel like every contract, especially when you're talking about wide receiver twos or, foundational pieces, Jalen Waddle, Devontae Smith, those guys had to make a contract that worked for both sides. Jamar Chase, though he's going to be the highest paid receiver in football, he has to make a contract that works for both sides. I know it might take a little bit more off the top for T and Trey Hendrickson, but I think that's a conversation that really every front office and star player has when they reach free agency, is you have to find a contract and a structure that works for both sides. And that's just where guarantees end up, which has obviously been the hang up for the Bengals for years, and how much guaranteed money at the front and the years and everything along those lines. So I don't know that that's necessarily a huge shot at the Bengals. I think the bigger one was the quote or anecdote. I don't know if it was direct quotes or not from Kelsey and Conway, but she said that Duke Tobin said they wouldn't pay that many people the top of their position.
It's hard. I think it's hard to pay. It's hard to pay the top player at their three top players at their position.
Yeah, and obviously Joe Burrow already. We have Jamar Chase coming down the pipe this offseason, and then Trey Hendrickson. The thought process is he would be asking for that. Now, if you throw a fourth in there, paying T top wide receiver money, that's next to impossible. So I think that is a big component, whether we like it or not. Is T has to make it work for the Bengals if he wants to come back. But he's also already starting to do that by switching agents, going to Jamar's agent, laying the groundwork throughout the season. I think he's starting to do that. And I don't know that making it work for the Bengals is just automatically $20 million instead of $30 million. I think it's more about structure than anything else.
Fair enough. And structure is the biggest hang-up with Cincinnati because they just operate differently. And differently, not in a good way, obviously, but they do operate differently. So it's like, okay, how much, if you want to come back, negotiating with the Bengals is going to be different than negotiating with probably 95% of the NFL when it comes to the teams that are probably in position to sign them. So obviously Washington makes sense. The Chargers make sense. There's a lot of teams out there that make sense. But again, only one of these teams has Joe Burrow, who he's had all his success with. We only have a couple minutes before I have to bump out. But what you guys think? I saw that Charlie kind of got beat up on social media yesterday. And it caught everyone's attention. And look, he backed it up by talking about, like, when you go and look at all the film and everything, he said that outside of Joe Burrow, there's only one player that made more winning plays in the season for the Bengals, and that was T. Higgins. What was your takeaway of that? Because it seemed to get a lot of pushback on social media. I thought that was interesting.
I think it's tough to say that when you have a guy that led the league in sacks and another guy with the Triple Crown, but obviously that's not something that you can necessarily just point to with statistics. And T. Higgins made a lot of winning plays.
Yeah.
So I don't know that I would argue that too heavily, but I would certainly lean the guy that averaged 100 yards and a touchdown every game.
T. Higgins has made some of the biggest plays the past 2 years.
For sure.
And especially like when you talk about do or die moments, that Vikings game last season was a do or die moment. Yeah. Where did the ball go? It went to him.
Broncos game this year?
Broncos game, do or die moment. The guy had, and that's no knock on what Jamar chased. And when you win the Triple Crown, as a receiver. It's like nothing to joke about. But I'm just saying, when you need a big moment, you throw it up to T. Higgins, he's going to come down with it. Like, that's a guy you need. And I was having an argument in the chat with Mr. Mo, and I understand why fans don't want to pay 2 wide receivers elite top money. I understand that, especially when you have a defense as atrocious as it is. Saying that, I don't want to take away from the offense. The offense is the one thing that's making this team go right now. If we don't have that, or if we take away from it, I'm concerned that we now don't have a top offense and we don't have a top defense. So, in my opinion, if I had to pick one, I'd pay. Let's pay T. Higgins, and let's hope that somebody on the defensive side of the football can play the sport.
Man, and yeah, we'll obviously be keeping an eye on this, obviously moving forward. But guys, I got to bounce. We got to bounce. But Trace is going to come in and keep the train rolling, of course. So this is where the vibes increase, right? This is where
That's
what they say.
Yeah, that's what I know. One person in particular is going to say for sure. But hey, guys, have a good rest of your day. Trace taking over from here. More off the bench when we come back.
Hold on a minute. Yeah, no, that's on me.
I got to mess with the cameras.
That's on me.
Here I am in program, live and in person, off the bench, quite literally. Here on Off the Bench.
My apologies, boss man.
United Dairy Farmers, and came in on the back end of conversation, obviously, about the Cincinnati Bengals, what they should do, where they should go. Don't have here's where I've come to grips with off seasons, and it's not good for sports talk, what I'm about to say, in a little bit of a sense, but I've come to realize that over the years, when you sit here and you get into debates of what you should or shouldn't do, more times than not, you have no clue, right? If I were to say to you, what are you going to be doing in 20 years? You really don't know. You might have an idea of what you think you might want to do, but you don't have a damn clue in the world. It's why it's the dumbest interview question that I've ever heard in my life when someone asks, what do you want to be doing in the next 10 years? I don't know. I'm trying to figure out what I'm going to get for lunch quite literally in an hour. And you're trying to tell me what I'm supposed to be doing in 10 years? Now, we can sit here and debate on what's the best route, but I've heard and I've read, whatever term you'd like to use, on Twitter the last few days, and by Twitter I guess I mean X, what the Reds should be doing and what the Bengals should be doing. And the reality is, the last few years, this is what we've heard, at least on the Reds side of the house, right? A couple years ago, it was, oh man, what a terrible season we're about to have. I mean, we're going to lose probably every bit of 90-plus games. We have nobody coming up. Next thing you know, I'm like, you know what? Let's do a show every day. Show the people that we're really in it, you know? We'll start at the bottom and we'll work our way all the way up. Turns out we were in the race to possibly win the division at the All-Star break.
Yeah.
And then we were in the playoff race until he's gone now, but David Bell might have taken out Hunter Green when he was throwing possibly a complete game gem after like 14 or 15 strikeouts that we just so happened to be at. And he got taken out. But my point stands is that they went from being some team that had no chance at all to being quite literally in the playoff hunt all the way until the last day of the season, 2 days of the season, I think. Mm-hmm. Fast forward into the next year. Well, I'll tell you what. There's one thing that you can count on in 2023, though, if it was going to be terrible. What was it? It was the starting pitching. Remember, we had the big three. We had Lodolo, Ashcraft, and Hunter Green, and not a single one of those were worth a piss. Not a single one of them. Not a single one of them. And in fact, if we would have had a little bit of help from any of them, we might have made the postseason. But instead, we had Ellie who came up, McLean who came up, Steer who came up. We had all these, TJ Friedel had a hell of a year. We had all these players that we were excited about going into the next season because we thought, you know what? The starting pitching can't possibly be that bad. But we got all these young guys coming up. Noelve Marte, Matt McLean, Ellie De La Cruz, TJ Friedel, CES. What happened? We watched the whole season, and half of them weren't worth a piss, and if they were worth a piss, then they were on the disabled list. So I'm done with all of that. I just am. Is Austin Hayes a good signing? It's $5 million. What are we talking about?
Did they even sign him yet?
What?
They haven't even
announced
signed
it
him.
yet.
Well, I'm assuming.
Okay.
I'm assuming. And maybe I shouldn't assume. Maybe I shouldn't assume. Okay? But let's just say, for instance, that does come to bear. I'm hopeful that maybe the physical is the reason why or something else. Who knows? Who knows? And if it doesn't, then okay, I guess we don't have Austin Hayes. I still feel the same way. Whether we have him or we don't, I'm not saying it doesn't matter or it does matter. If we get 2023 Austin Hayes, guess what? We're all going to be like, this is the greatest signing we've ever had. He could also be Will Myers. And I don't know what he's going to be. I'm not going to sit here and suggest I do know. But I do know one thing. It's that I walked in on a conversation that was about franchises making decisions that everyone else in the league had the exact same opportunities to make. And we got ourselves in a position this morning where we have to debate on whether or not we could go get a center fielder perhaps. Now, he's been injury prone, right? That could probably make a pretty big damn difference. But,
Large difference.
But let's just say money was the real culprit. We can act like maybe perhaps it was because they were asking too much in prospects. But the reports are, and correct me if I'm wrong, I'm relatively new to this. The reports are that they wanted us to basically take the entirety of the contract. It was going to be a salary dump, and we were going to have to take that and bear it. You know what happens more times than not at organizations that have the ability to do things like that? They don't give a damn. And that's the real issue that I've come to grips with baseball in general. Now, I'm not going to get on the same soapbox I went on the other day, but when I talk about the inequities that exist, it's that you have to be perfect. The same way the Bengals are going to have to be perfect if they sign T. Higgins to a number one type wide receiver role, it's because they've allocated all their funds to one position group and or one unique connection point between a quarterback and a receiver. And we can all agree that that's a very important thing in the NFL. If it's not the most important thing, it's sitting right behind being able to get to the quarterback. And you already have a guy that can get to the quarterback who's under contract, and I get that he might hold out and do all those things, but we did the same song and dance last year, and we seen what happened. The truth is that when you get down to push comes a shove, just like in life, whoever has the most money usually wins because they have the ability to hold out leverage longer than the next guy. So Trey Hendrickson, if we want to sit here and discuss it, I know I'm bouncing around all over the place right now, but if you want to discuss whether or not he's going to hold out or this guy's going to hold out, okay, then just miss game checks. See how that feels. You start losing millions of dollars because you're trying to hold out for the next best thing. Somehow, I'm just assuming they start crawling back.
He might retire, though.
Well, if he retires, that's great. He could retire. And you know what? Some people,
Just such a joke.
some people will have, I don't want to say it's an ego, but they'll have this strong backbone of saying, you know what? I believe, money doesn't control me, so I will do something that others won't do just to basically make sure that I'm right or I feel like I get the right end of the stick. Now, whether or not Hendrickson does that, I highly doubt it. But going back to the whole song and dance that we do every single offseason for every sport, am I wrong in saying that at this point, maybe I shouldn't do this as someone that obviously is a part of a Red show and someone that does a show here from time to time? It's terrible sports talk. I get it. It's terrible sports talk. But I'm going to always openly say from now on, I don't know. I don't know. Because every single season, every single person's been wrong about the narrative that they've taken into the following season. The bullpen was going to be bad, remember?
Yep.
Remember that one? I remember like 2 weeks into the first season when we started doing Chatterbox Reds every single night, the bullpen was the reason this team wasn't going to make the postseason. In fact, you know what? You look back at the end of the year, the bullpen was the best one that they had. It was the best unit of the entire team was the bullpen. Even the big one. Even the big one. The folks that have the biggest radio microphones in the world don't get it right. Right?
That's
and
right.
that's why You want to do the trifecta right now? Let's do it. That's why Wes Miller right now, might be in prime position in this city to be the best coach in the city. Not because he is. Not because he is. Not because he is because I see every single person right now acting as if he's the worst coach in the country. And I'm not going to get into debates of whether or not he is or isn't the best coach. But I would just say, if you watch UC basketball for more than 1 or 2 games, the issue lies in the fact that they don't have talent on the inside. And that's it. That's it. Quite literally it. You get a couple guys that can actually, do their job, rebound, block shots, score the basketball when they're getting the ball passed to them within 3 or 4 feet of the basket.
Would be nice.
That's what you kind of need if you're going to have guys out there who can't guard, like Aziz and Mandego.
Wes said it himself after the Xavier game. You can't make layups. You can't make free throws. You can't make dunks. You should have just stopped there.
Yeah, listen, I understand what you're saying, and it's as we debate all this stuff, it's like nobody really knows what's going to happen, so why do it? But you have to. This is part of the job. You gotta theorize.
It's not that I'm arguing that we shouldn't have conversations about it. It's that when I see people take such strong stances on it, like they 100% are telling you that the sky is blue. Like, you shouldn't, in my opinion, you shouldn't be on X or wherever else dunking on people.
Yeah.
Because this was the most intelligent move that they've made all offseason because they brought in Austin Hayes, allegedly, or if they didn't. It's like, let's just sit down, relax, understand it's only $5 million if allegedly that's true. And let's let it play out. I can't believe the discourse that happens, and maybe it's just because it's the internet and it's not a real place at times, but the discourse that happens between the vigor that is T. Higgins, whether or not he should be re-signed, and the vigor that is, well, this isn't enough, the Reds need to do more, or the Reds have had the best offseason in baseball. I can't, am I allowed to be in the middle of all this?
Sure.
Am I allowed to be, what's the guy's name in Hamilton? Aaron Burr, sir?
Yeah.
Am I allowed to be him where you just kind of I'm not trying to play both sides, but I'm just saying I'm not sure anybody's right here.
But honestly, no. You aren't allowed to be in the middle. You have to pick a side, and you have to make it your entire brand and live and die on takes. That's just what being a sports fan is these days. It's miserable, but you have to be right and wrong every single time. You can't just toe the line.
I wish there was a middle ground. But I think it's hard to do that, especially given the fact that there is a need to want to be right more than anything. I know that more than anything. I mean, when the Reds let go of David Bell, I was ready to root against whoever that next new manager was, unless it was Terry Francona.
You said those words.
I said those exact words because I thought it was frustrating that the entirety of last season was being placed on David Bell, similarly to where the UC basketball season kind of is right now with Wes Miller, including myself. I'm blaming Wes Miller. I think that's a little bit different given the fact that I do think there is talent on the roster. I just don't understand how they play this bad. It boggles the mind. And with the Bengals, it's you look at T. Higgins, you look at Trey Hendrickson. What's going to happen? Who do you need more? Do you need T. Higgins? And then it's, if you let him go, right? Or if Joe Mixon, we all like Joe Mixon, but then Joe Mixon had to get paid $10 million, and we don't like Joe Mixon anymore. But then this year, it's like, look what Joe Mixon's doing, and it's all about proving each other wrong to an extent. And unfortunately, that's the way it is. Shout out First Take for starting that.
And listen, I'm not here to suggest that you can't have discourse and debate over what decisions are made and what they're not made. I just find it hard to believe that you still go down the path that is you think that you know something when in reality we have history that has shown that we've done this 2 or 3 years in a row with both of these organizations, and we've been wrong almost every single time. Almost every single time. I was told behind this desk, sitting right there not too long ago, that Jermaine Burton was going to be the guy that replaces T. Higgins. And here we sit. And Jermaine Burton's ripping slot machines at Hollywood Casino, and we're begging T. Higgins to come back. I mean, I'm just saying, maybe we can just all, and I know I seen Fred, I think in the chat said, this guy's telling people to relax.
Fair.
I mean, maybe it's Groundhog's Day, maybe it's not. I don't know. But I have decided for the Reds, I've told you this before, I'll tell you again, have I been pessimist? I don't know what the right word is. I've been bound in the dumps. I don't know if it's the weather. I haven't been able to go outside in 2 months. I don't know if it's the fact that every time I turned around, the Dodgers were signing what would be our best player. Not once, not twice, not 3 times, not 4 times, but probably 5 times this offseason. They signed a guy that would be our best player. And you look at the roster sometimes, and I got to get myself out of the spiral, but I did it the other day just to make myself feel even worse. Is that I went to Fangraphs and I checked out the Dodgers roster, and I thought to myself, if we were on a video game right now, would you be allowed to make a trade 1-for-1 on any player that the Dodgers currently have on the starting pitching staff and or the field? Would they trade any single person position for position? And I think I've come up with the answer is no. Their 5th starter, I don't think, and again, this is where Nick was probably going to hate my guts for saying it, and I hope I'm wrong. This is not me wishing it to be true. But I think that their 5th starter, they wouldn't trade for Hunter Green. I don't think that they would take our ace and replace it with their worst. I don't think they would. I could be wrong. Maybe I'll be wrong. And you know what? The beauty of baseball is that maybe, and this is where I'm trying to convince myself, the beauty of baseball is that if you get into the postseason, it's 1 week of baseball. Who's playing the best at that time? You got a chance to run off some games, and you have a chance to win. That's where my head's at. That's where I got to leave it at. Otherwise, I get down the spiral of psychological warfare with my brain about what this upcoming season is going to be, and it winds up not being good.
So what you're saying is you're all in.
Is that a Xavier pun?
No. It wasn't supposed to be, but now it kind of is.
Okay. Well, I wasn't sure if that was a Xavier pun or not, but I am cautiously optimistic, and the reason for, I guess, the cautious part, and it's not just full blown all in, is that the reality is a lot of the things that need to happen we have not seen yet fully, and that's okay. But we can all agree that that's the case.
Sure.
And again, this isn't rocket science, but everyone wants to get up in arms about one single player that they're going to bring in the outfield or this, that, and the other. And I just think I've come to the realization that that's not really what it's going to be about at all. Matt McClain's going to have to be the guy that he was in his rookie season that was one of the best second basemen in baseball, or I guess you could say infielders since he moved around a little bit.
Yep.
And I got a name. This is maybe the hot take of the day. This is the guy that I actually think, and this is where you can take it one of 2 ways. You can get depressed what I'm about to say, or you can say, you know what? There's something to that. The most important player in the infield outside the obvious is Santiago Espinal. And if that makes your heart hurt, I understand. But I also would say he played relatively well down the stretch last year. Maybe if he gets some comfortability of being at a certain place for a certain amount of time, he has had success in the past. He's the only guy that I trust to play defense at third base. And the reality is that they're going to have to rely on him. And if he plays well and above his head, if you want to call it that, and they find TJ Friedl to play every day and Matt McClain plays every day, I do think they could win the Central. I do. But those are dominoes that all have to go together, right? It can't just be 2 of those 3 have to happen. I think all 3 of those have to happen.
We talked about it yesterday, kind of that who has the most pressure on them outside of, Matt and Ellie, the obvious guys. But we talked about Candelario and how everyone's just kind of forgetting about him, begging for that $15 million a year bat and for agency this year. Well, we got one last year. He just happened to stink. So if he can be, half of what we expect him to be this year, that raises the floor of this team pretty drastically too.
Yeah, and it's so many question marks. Last year tricked us into, or I guess the 2023 season tricked the 2024 season into being something that it wasn't. and it was going to be great, and we had all these young guys, and we were going to make a case for the Central, and we were going to make the playoffs, and you were going to have Ellie and Matt and everybody, and then you slowly learn that, these guys actually have to play baseball, and then they have to stay healthy, and then they've got to be available down the stretch, and they've got to be actually good at baseball. CES last season was one of the worst players, one of the worst qualified players in Major League Baseball. Will Benson couldn't swing a bat if his life depended on it. Jamir Candelario, for a large portion of the season, couldn't swing a bat, couldn't walk half the time, couldn't play defense. And now this year, I think the expectations are back, not exactly to where they were before the 2023 season, because that season was supposed to be a lost cause. This is a little bit different. I think the expectations have changed from, this is going to be a bona fide playoff team to they're going to fight. And they're going to be competitive, and we're going to see what we have this year. Because if Matt McClain's hurt again this year, I'm not giving up on him, but that's clearly a guy you can't rely on, right? CES, if he's hurt again, or if he's bad again, that's a guy that I have doubts that we can trust and rely upon heading into 2026. You have a 3 to 4 year window here with Terry Francona and Ellie De La Cruz. You have to make the most of it. And by the way, that might be less because after the 2026 season, when this sport goes to hell, I don't know what anybody's going to be able to do. So really, it's these next 2 seasons. Take as much chances as you can because you have no idea what that other world looks like. And I don't know what it's going to look like if we lose a half season, a full season, 2 seasons. Who knows how long we're going to lose baseball after when the CBA comes crashing down. There's no way of knowing. My expectations this year is a team that's going to fight. And if they're able to fight similarly to the way they did in that 2023 season where the last game of the season mattered, that's all I'm asking for. That's all I can hope for. And to be a pessimist, I am a pessimist. I'm a pessimistic Reds fan. They made the playoffs 4 times in 30 years without advancing. Am I supposed to be happy? Yeah. Like, that's the part of it, too. And you can talk about the Bengals and the Bearcats, and there's so many other things here that we've discussed in the past 10 minutes, but it's like you're allowed to have questions, and that's the thing. You don't have to be settled on one exact thing. You don't have to be set on the fact that, Jake Fraley and we're going to have this platoon. Gavin Lux has to be in the infield. Gavin Lux, just roll with it for a little bit and see what happens because there is, honest to God, no way of knowing where this season's going to take us at this moment.
No, and I also 2 things that I also want to kind of talk about is Craig Sandlin yesterday put out a thread that I thought was very basically perfectly describes the situation that is the Cincinnati Reds. Phil Castellini comes out and says something, shocker, that everyone else on X disagrees with, and they want to start yelling, which was the notion that it's Nick Krall's decision of whether or not they're going to re-sign Ellie. That was the nuts and bolts of the way he said it. I don't have the exact quote in front of me, but that was the gist of it. And the truth is that whether you like that answer or whether you don't, I think if nothing else, the one thing that we can always rely on Phil Castellini of actually doing for us as a fan base is kind of saying what he is or telling the truth. You might not like what he says, and we might not agree with what he says, but I actually prefer somebody just to straight spit in my face than to smile in my face and turn around and badmouth me the whole way out. I'd rather just know the situation beforehand so I can deal with reality versus always just assuming that things are great when they're not. If that's the decision-making process, that is the ownership group, which is, hey, here's your budget. Outside of that, you do whatever you wish with it. We can all agree that Ellie can't be resigned. We can all agree that Nick Krall doesn't really have a decision to be made. As Craig pointed out, if it's Nick Krall's prerogative to spend half the payroll on one player, then I guess he could do that if he'd like. But we all know that that's not reality. You can't do that. If as much as we love Ellie and as much as we think that he's going to be a superstar, whether he will or won't be, and as much as we think how important that could be for the next generation of Reds fans, it doesn't really matter if the budget doesn't allow for it. We can all want to go out and get the shiny Corvette that sits in the parking lot that we go and we all agree that we love it. We think that we want it. But we go look at our finances and we'd rather, be able to eat lunch every day. So then that's the decision that Nick Krall's going to have to make. And he doesn't have a decision if we're being completely honest, which, again, whether you like it or you don't, that's the reality. So now we know, at least I do, that Ellie isn't going to be re-signed. And I've banged this drum from the very beginning, and everybody scoffed at me, and even the ones that the big microphones used to make fun of the fact that I was talking about, you got to extend Ellie almost last offseason, and if it's not last offseason, it has to be this offseason. The only reason I say that is not because I think Scott Boras wants to do that. Everyone always says, oh, Scott Boras doesn't want to do that. Scott Boras doesn't want to do that. He's never going to let that happen. He's never going to let that happen. Okay, the only leverage you have as the Reds is that he's making league minimum before he gets a chance to go to free agency, and you have the ability and or arbitration, and you have the ability to exponentially pay him while he can't make it. So you have an advantage that other teams don't have. Now, again, could the Dodgers or the Mets or the Yankees come in and just easily cover the cost that it was, the few years that the Reds have as an advantage? Probably. It also begs the question at some point is, do you want to play in this town? Which is the part that really sucks. We'll find out whether or not we're capable of signing big stars with the next CBA, and that'll be a decision made that has nothing to do with the Reds as a whole. But the bigger picture question that I have with the Reds is what are they going to do over the next 3 to 4 years that we can all agree that maybe we have a young core that we're underpaying right now? Because if we can't go out and take a salary dump for, if healthy, one of the best center fielders in all of baseball, if we can't do that now, then I guess it begs the question, will we ever be able to do it? Because it also, to Craig's thread, points to a bigger problem that the Reds currently face. This hasn't been said publicly, but it's just me reading the tea leaves. If you don't know what income you have coming in from your highest revenue provider, which is the television contract, it's probably hard to make big executive decisions. And I'm not trying to make excuses for the ownership group. I'm not trying to make excuses for Nick Krall. But we're going to have a collide here soon of collective ideologies within this fan base. If the Reds get near an opportunity to make the postseason at this All-Star break, let's say around the trade deadline, they're already proving right now as we speak that they don't really have a lot of financial flexibility to be able to go out and do something that other teams may be capable of doing, but we don't have that flexibility right now because of whatever reasons you want to say. The truth is that the ownership group probably doesn't have a significant amount of money to spend because the Reds don't bring in a significant amount of money, comparatively speaking, to the top-level teams in Major League Baseball, which is fair. They also don't have so much money sitting in their bank that they just treat it as a hobby and they can just spend whatever they want to spend. So who do they go to next? And this is where I think the rubber meets the road, probably for some. And I think that the question is what do you do with prospects? And that's the scary part. Because now we're in an age-old debate of what do you do if you're a small market? Do you get your chance and go all in and spend a bunch of money for a 2 or 3 year window and then be terrible for 6, 7, 8 years and then try to rebuild it up? Or do you just play the prospect game the entire time and hope that you continue to find good players that you can keep under league minimum for 3 to 4 years, put them in arbitration, trade them when they get close to becoming free agents, repeat, recycle, and hopefully win? The problem with that method is that you have to be so good at it and almost perfect at it that it seems almost unsustainable, right? Everyone always points towards the Tampa Bay Rays as the perfect, basically golden child of being able to do such a thing. And I would ultimately say that that is the best that you could possibly do with what they've been given. But the opposite is also true, which is what the Oakland A's continue to do, is what the Pittsburgh Pirates, and I dare I say, as much as we want to scoff and laugh at the Pittsburgh Pirates, we're not far behind them, if we aren't behind them. Now, that's the pessimistic side of all of it. But I guess I'm leading to a bigger question, which is when your financial situation is in limbo and you get to a chance to make the postseason this year, are they going to pull the trigger and actually trade a bunch of these prospects that we probably maybe should keep? That's the age-old debate. And I don't know if they will or not, but that's coming down the pike relatively soon.
Yeah, I think the answer would be yes. If they knew that the Castellinis, say whatever you want about them, they know if they have a good team and that if they did, especially like let's say hypothetically this team is really good this year. They fight. Let's say they win 85 games, somehow miss the playoffs. I don't know, something like that, to where they know they can go all in next year. They're going to go all in next year, and that might not mean spending on a ton of free agents, but it will mean trading prospects, and I do think they would do that. And I'd argue that, you know, with as young of a core and as young of a lineup as we have right now, where are the other young guys going to play once they're ready? Like, where is Arroyo playing? When would Arroyo get here, and when would he play? I don't know. So if my options are Arroyo, I don't see him for 2 more years because, quite frankly, he doesn't have a spot in the infield. Or you have Luis Robert, who I can get right now in right field, whether or not he plays 150 games. That's, I mean, you're betting on that, but you're also betting on, I made the point earlier, you're betting on every single other player to be healthy too. So why not bet on Robert? You know, I would say that they would. I think the Reds know what they've got. They know they can't, you know, bring up every single prospect. Not to mention, even if they do become the prospect that you hope that they are, then you know you can't pay them. So it's like, I don't think they're afraid to trade prospects. I think they're afraid to go all in before it's too early, because I think they've made that mistake before, and they don't want to make it again, especially right now with this entire sport in limbo.
I don't think they're afraid to trade prospects either. I think they're afraid to miss, because if you're the Reds and you trade prospects for a big guy and he's not good, then you have nothing, and you're not going to be able to go get big guys in free agency, and then you have no prospects left to move, and you're just spinning your tires for, 3-4 years if you miss on that. So if you're going to trade a package like we're talking about for Luis Robert, which was Chase Petty and Edwin Arroyo, which is what was reported, that's a lot for a guy with injury concerns. And I mean, I know the money is a different talking point, but if the Reds are held up on moving those 2 guys for an injury-riddled center fielder, I think I'm okay with that being a reservation if they aren't willing to eat some money. It's moving a lot for the Reds farm system, but then again, when you get to the All-Star break, if you are in contention, you got to go in at some point. The last 2 years, I've said it wasn't the right time. I've been on the side of keeping the prospects, and not really. Last year wasn't as much of a talking point as the year before when they were leading the Central, but it just felt like such a risk with all those guys in their first year. Now you have to know what you have. You have to at least have a thought process about believing in what you have and what they can get to, and then fill the holes that you recognize around that. If the Reds don't ever compete or show that they're going to compete with Ellie for these 3 or 4 years, why would he resign? Not even money-wise. Why would he come back to Cincinnati if you can't win with him on a minimum deal? What makes you think you can win with him paying him $500 million? Why would he think that? So if he loves Cincinnati to death and you show him for 4 years that you can't win putting things around him or having the opportunity to put things around him, then I think that just continues to decrease the small amount of bargaining chips we have in terms of negotiations.
And I also think Ellie's going to be the main topic of conversation in this town for quite some time until he either decides to move on and or re-sign with the Reds, and that's rightfully so because of who he is and what he has a capability of being. But I also don't, as an organization, want to get so invested into one single player that you lose sight of what the overall goal is, which is the only real reason that us fans actually care, and that's winning, right? Like, I just look at and again, not to jump around from sports, but I look at all the winning franchises that have had success over the past, call it 10, 15 years, and those fan bases certainly love players, without question. But they don't care if someone gets traded away and then all of a sudden the team still has success. Where we care, or where they would care as well, is if you do make trades or you do give away pieces that are valuable and you still don't win. And that's where I think you bring a valid point, which is I would turn that on its head, though, and say, if you're the Reds franchise, the only real fastball you have or pitch that other franchises might not have is your ability to, quite frankly, out-scout and out-draft and outsmart other franchises. It's the only way you get ahead.
It's how we got Gavin Lux.
It's the only way you get ahead. And I would just say, if you are always worried about trading a prospect or two, then what is your confidence level in being able to replenish the system as a whole?
Yeah.
Right?
Fair.
If I have one golden goose, then yeah, I'm probably going to always be scared to give that up. But if I feel like I have 10 and someone's offering me an opportunity to have success immediately right now, yes, I might be selective on which one I give away, but the reality is I'm okay with giving away almost any of them Because I guess my point is if we're going to look at this thing as a franchise right now, that Ellie's expendable in a way, that's what we're doing. Like, if we're not making it a priority to clearly make Ellie a part of the future, if Ellie's expendable, or if, let's just say, Ellie's not capable of being re-signed, then I think it points to a bigger picture, which is true in Major League Baseball. The Angels has proven this. One player, no matter how good they are, isn't going to help a team get over the hump or not. This isn't basketball, and this isn't football. Clearly, the Chiefs and Patrick Mahomes, if you take Patrick Mahomes away from the Chiefs, they probably don't have nearly the same amount of success. I would say in basketball, you could take a 15-year stretch with LeBron James, and if you took LeBron James off the team, they aren't going to the NBA Finals like they were. So, if your league's in a situation where Mike Trout has played for a team for as long as he played for them and put up the numbers that he did during that same stretch, and they still continually miss the postseason, might I remind you, at one time they had Shohei Ohtani and Mike Trout and missed the postseason, then it leads you to believe that one player isn't the end-all, be-all. So I ask the question is are we going to treat Ellie's next 3 to 4 years like there's zero chance to win without him? And if the answer is yes, that's fine. Because at some point we have to win, is where I'm at. And I think as a fan base, we've gotten ourselves where we cannibalize each other. And I understand why. But it's like, I was thinking of the analogy the other day, and maybe this was a terrible thought. But I was thinking, like, there's times where you see a dog in the alley, right?
Yeah.
And I mean, they're clearly malnourished. They're clearly astray. They're clearly, not probably had a whole lot of love in their life. If you were to walk up to that dog and they were either to attack you and or run away or scoff at the idea of you wanting to pet them, we as humans would understand that. Like, we would be like, all right, there's a real reason as to why they're acting the way they're acting. But somehow, as fans of the Reds, whenever we see somebody being a little pessimistic or just not excited because of this or that, why do we jump on their case and think to ourselves like, you're always going to be like that. You can't get excited for Austin Hayes. And I'm not saying that you shouldn't be. I'm just saying openly that I can't be dismissive of what the folks that have endured the last 30 years have endured to be the way that they are. They're conditioned to be like that.
Yeah.
If you're a Chiefs fan that's 27 years old, whether they win the Super Bowl or not, in the offseason, they probably don't care what the Chiefs do. They could care less. And their expectation is the next time that the ball gets rolling out on the field is that the Chiefs are going to win another Super Bowl because they've been conditioned to be that way. So I'm just saying, as Reds fans, I get the idea of always being tired of hearing people being pessimistic about everything. Certainly, I get that. And I don't know why maybe you'd want to live your life that way. And you could ask the question of why are they like this? But when you ask that question, I always come back to the same thing I just mentioned. They've been conditioned to be like that. And the problem always lies in sports is that you always want to point a finger at who's the problem child. And the reality is with the Reds, I don't want to point to Nick Kroll and say he's the reason why. He's not been around long enough. You could say it's the Castellini's fault, but you know what? I'll also be honest with you. I think that there's a problem within Major League Baseball that makes it almost nearly impossible for them to do what we all want every offseason. And yes, you can sit here and tell me that they could find a way. They have the money. They're millionaires. Again, you can go out and you can buy that Corvette today too. You might not be able to feed your family when you buy it, but you can buy it. You 100% could buy it. You got just enough money to go get it. And sometimes I feel like that's what we're asking our ownership group to do, is to go out and buy the Corvette. Yeah, you might lose all your net worth. The last 50 years of building the business that you've been successful with, sell it. Just so we can try to have some winning season in Cincinnati. And I'll also say, if that's you who's asking for that, I understand why. Because you just want the same thing we all want, which is a winning team.
I saw this debate. Would you trade Ellie De La Cruz for a World Series?
For a World Series?
Yeah.
Yeah, no question about it.
Yeah.
Zero question about it. I'd trade Joe Burrow for a Super Bowl. Like, championships don't happen in this city.
That's what
I'll do whatever it takes to get one.
Now, let's take it back a notch. Would you trade Ellie De La Cruz for a playoff run?
No.
Yeah, neither would I.
How deep's that run? Are you winning a pennant?
You
losing
are
the World
you are
Series?
competing. You're competing for the pennant.
No. If you're in that series, you got a chance.
My point being,
Are you guaranteeing a loss in that series, or you're there?
I'm guaranteeing you that you're there.
That you're there. That's
Yeah,
a decent,
yeah.
just a decent debate.
Yeah, I think it.
My
I think I'm probably
point
taking that.
being is that like there's no real reason why you shouldn't have that realization to have the moment to be all in. At some point you have to have it.
Yeah.
At some point you have to be all in. And the Austin Hayes signing's great. You know, the Taylor Rogers signing's great.
Right.
All these signings are great. But they're still not up to that point where we're competing for a World Series. We're not there yet. There's going to be a moment, and unfortunately for the small market teams, whether or not you pay Ellie De La Cruz, and Jacob's right too, it's where if you pay $500 million to Ellie, what's that going to do for the franchise going forward? And it's probably not a whole lot, to be quite honest. Joey Votto, that everybody still talks about how bad that contract is.
If only he would have asked.
Yeah,
The ownership. To get him
yeah.
out.
If they would
Stop
have,
with the
if he stopped
TikToks.
doing TikToks. Yeah, Joey Votto was a Hall of Fame baseball player. He was as good of a baseball player as
Outperformed his contract.
as you could possibly be in this sport. What did it get him? It got him nothing. And it got the Reds nothing. It got the Reds nowhere. I'm not saying they shouldn't have signed the deal because they should have. The Reds made a decision to sign and extend a Hall of Fame baseball player. They made the right move. I'm just saying that, all this stuff, the signing Ellie, the not signing Ellie, the making these trades, can you pay enough money for Robert? All of this is just like, it's small market talk to a point where there has to be a moment to go all in. And if there's not that moment, I'm concerned that we'll never have it. And if we never have it, like Jacob and Trace were just talking about it, if we're too afraid to pay Robert now, there isn't going to be that moment. There has to be a moment. I'm going to hope that it's next year, the year right before the CBA. We're going to see what we have this year. After this one, the 2026 seasons are all in year. And if it's not, then I'm wrong, then that's fine. But, there comes a point to where it's not sustainable to just go half in. And that's kind of what they're doing now. I'm not blaming them for it necessarily because of the way the sport is. You can't compete with $800 million to Juan Soto. You can't do it. So if you're going to do it this way and you're going to try to bring up prospects and you're going to try to play the long game, I hope it works, but just know that it's probably not the end all. The Rays, everybody points at the Rays. The Rays have had continued success. They haven't won anything, right? The Guardians, they've had continued success. They bring up all these guys that they haven't won anything. Would I like to compete?
To be fair, they've been right there. Though.
Sure,
they've been right there, and I get the argument that you're making. They didn't do it, right? The one thing that we all hope that happens is they get it done and they do it. They win the World Series.
Yeah.
I think it's a little disingenuous on both sides of the aisle. It's very similar to modern day politics. Is that it's like you could say that the Guardians and the Rays didn't do it, and you're right, they didn't win a World Series, but they got there and they were damn close. And one play here and a play there, or a hit here and a hit there, and they did do it. Yeah. So my point is like, does that justify the fact of what the way that they go? Just because they don't give up, let's say that there wasn't a rain delay in Cleveland, are we going to justify that everything they did over the course of 3 years is worth it or not worth it off of over 2 innings of baseball? Of course we wouldn't do that. But I also agree with what you're saying is the only way to win, I think we can all agree now, looking at this as a holistic view, is the only way to win is what Nick has said, Kirby, of course, is like you have to have prospects. You only win if you have 5 or 6, 7 legitimate big league players that are under team control. And the bigger question ultimately is like, what's the realistic expectation of having that? And it seems like it's very rare. It's going to be very rare for that to happen. But more importantly, this is a crazy thought, and I'm not trying to be a conspiracist or somebody that wants to rig the system. But if I was a small ownership group, I'd be forming allies. And I'm not even kidding when I say this. I know people think that this might be a joke. I'd be forming allies, man. I would be trying to find 3 to 4 other like-minded ownership groups that want to win, yes, but they also understand that this thing's rigged against us. And the truth is that if we have a chance, if there's a legitimate chance, I'm calling 3 to 4 ownership groups and I'm saying, I need some help. I'm going to give you a couple prospects, but I'm going to need to get a favor from you. And we're going to have a couple of these guys come over. And listen, The truth is that
Collusion.
Would an A's, Reds, Rockies super team even do anything though?
it gives you could say whatever you want, but I mean the fact of the matter is that it seemed like the Oakland A's for a short time were giving all their players to the Braves.
They did
and I mean the Braves don't need help, but somehow they were just handing over unbelievable players.
Brent Rooker's going to be a Brave at the deadline.
It's like, what are we doing? So I guess, I am asking for conspiracies. And if that's wrong, then I guess I'm just wrong for wanting to win.
We deserve a win in this city. Nobody deserves a win more than this city does. So maybe Minnesota.
And the most depressing conversation point of the week is our best chance at long-term success in Cincinnati, a year-long holdout, and small market teams changing the way contracts are done in 26 or after 26.
Yes, but I mean, I still think the Dodgers are going to walk out skating on on ice.
Joe Kelly actually talked about this on a podcast the other day. He said that everyone's trying to fix the Dodger situation with a salary cap and a floor. And he said that if everyone's able to offer you, he said $10, but whatever.
Right.
If everyone's able to offer you $10, everyone's going to go pick to live in LA over Cincinnati or Minnesota or anything anyway. But obviously the other side of that is you can't.
Exactly. There's a
So that argument makes no sense.
With all due respect, listen, the people, and I don't want to go down this warpath today because you know what it turns into? It turns into
got
like
20 minutes.
Well, I'm just saying. What it looks like is it turns into Trace always complaining about Major League Baseball and why it's unfair and that's why the Reds can't win, and you have this pity party all the time. Let me tell you something. And I know Tito Francona feels this way, and I respect that out of him. But if I'm Phil Castellini or I'm in the ownership group or I'm in the baseball operations side of the Reds, I don't have this mentality. I wouldn't. I'm like my competitive spirit wouldn't allow me to be the things that I'm getting ready to explain. To be very clear, right? I wouldn't make excuses. There would be no excuses. You find a way to win regardless. But having said that, if I'm not in that room and I'm sitting outside of it, the truth is that the reason that most people are invested in the NFL the way they are is, yes, the sport is what it is. But they have every team's fan base believing that they are a move or two away, that they're capable of doing from being in contention for the Super Bowl. And you can laugh and scoff at that all you want and say, well, look at the winners. Look at the winners, the Patriots and the Chiefs. Okay, I get it. There has been one or two teams that have been dominant. But as far as teams that have fluctuated throughout the system that have allowed themselves a chance to try to beat the Chiefs or try to beat the Patriots is the point.
Yeah.
We would not be sitting here pessimistic as Reds fans if we made the postseason half the time. And we might not have won the World Series, but do you remember us getting to the World Series? As Bengal fans, you can say that. Do you remember us getting to the NL championship and losing in Game 7? That's what the Bengals did just a few years ago. Like, those experiences as a fan spur you on. Yeah. They give you life. The only thing that spurs on this fan base is hope and optimism of young, good players playing. Not winning, just playing well. Yeah. Just playing well. We won 80 games, 81 games. What was it, 81 games? I don't want to misspeak. Maybe it was 82 games. And we were excited, not because we made the postseason. We were excited because we had a couple young players that played really well that we thought, you know what, we can build upon this. They don't do that in the NFL. You guys missed the playoffs. The Bengals missed the playoffs by a game. And what was it? It was a failure. It was a failure. If that happens for the Reds this season, we will be jumping for joy heading into the next opening day. We'll be sad that they didn't make the postseason, yes, but I can promise you when you come around to February and March, we would be excited about the previous season. So this whole notion that the parity isn't a real thing or the salary cap and salary floor isn't a real thing. The reason Patrick Mahomes plays for the Kansas City Chiefs, is because he has a salary cap. If they didn't, I got news for you. The New York Jets or the Chargers or somebody in some big city that has a significant amount of money would have him.
Yeah.
They would have him. And guess what else they'd have? They'd have Jamar Chase, they'd have Joe Burrow, they'd have all the top players. And then that league, got news for you, that league would be worthless.
Yeah.
And you could say whatever you want about whether you think that that's fair or unfair. I'm not here to debate that. I'm here to just to say, from an entertainment purpose, if you're going to argue that all they need is a salary floor, I'm not trying to call you an idiot. I'm just going to be honest with you. Salary floor, what the hell does that do for us? What does it do? Oh, so the Reds had to spend $200 million. Oh, the Dodgers spend $1 billion. How's that going to fix anything? So Stuart Fairchild makes a little bit more money. That's great.
We can feel a little bit better.
That's fantastic. I'm so thankful for that. The people that are going to take the biggest hit if there was a salary cap, newsflash, is only about probably 5 to 10% of the entire MLB. And that is the superstars. Shohei Ohtani probably doesn't make $1 billion. He'll have to settle for $550 million in this lifetime.
Oh, man.
Tough. I know.
Offset to 2090.
It's just like, and again, if that makes me a bad person because I'm sitting here and I'm arguing against the players getting paid, I'm not arguing that. Hell, if you want to take, let's make it fair. If you want to take the amount, the overall revenue from the league as a whole, and you want to say this is how much players were paid, right? Let's project it into 2020, 2030. I don't care. Project the total overall salaries to 2030 of how much Major League Baseball would spend and put that in a pool, split it up with all the teams, so you're still, as a league, spending the same amount of money. It's just that the same 4 teams aren't spending all of it. That fixes the problem. And if it doesn't fix the problem, if you don't think it fixes the problem, then I guess we'll never agree. And that's fine. We can agree to disagree. But that's the reality of Major League Baseball. Until then, I guess I'll be a pessimist about the whole thing.
I think that's kind of a pretty big shift this offseason. Obviously, small market teams have been putting up a fight for a while now, but it seems like just like the general population of the world is recognizing a major problem in Major League Baseball. We talked about it earlier this week. Maybe it was last week. All the days run together. But when has there been this big of a national, this is a problem with the sports league? I can't remember it.
Everyone always talks about the Dodgers being the problem. Sometimes I see, oh, the Dodgers, I hate them for this. Oh, what did they do wrong? They did nothing wrong. They did nothing wrong. All they did was want to win, and they had the resources to try to make that happen. If you want to be upset at the system, look at the system. Like, they're playing by the rules. And the Dodgers, if anything, and I tweeted it in jest, yes, I know, but it's like, if the Dodgers they're probably like, again, this is a joke, I don't want people to take it, they're like 1 or 2 more moves away from maybe fixing baseball.
Yeah.
I mean, if they would have gotten Juan Soto, at what point's enough? That's what's happened this offseason. If we're being honest, that's what happened this offseason. We've had enough. We've had enough. Small market fans that have and again, I'm not trying to be this. When I say these things, I don't mean them to be derogatory. But small market fans that have a rational brain have come to the realization that this whole thing has no chance of being successful more times than not, based off the way that it's constructed.
You have to get lucky. And
you have to get a little lucky. And yeah, you could sit here and say that if you do everything perfect, you go out and you get an international superstar and you find him, I don't know, you get lucky and you find a kid that's maybe one of the best players in the world and you only got to pay him $50,000 as a signing bonus. And, maybe they rise up the ranks and next thing you know, they become like they're one of the most exciting players in Major League Baseball and you can get him and you can get this guy and that guy and they all come up together. That's the other thing. They can't come up in spurts. They got to all come up together. Then maybe you can compete with the team that just decides they're just going to be able to spend money. And that's the reality of what we sit in as Major League Baseball fans as a whole. And that's a pretty negative outlook on it all. I get it. But until it gets fixed, that's how I'm going to feel. I can't lie to people. I can't do it. I have no way to sit up here and tell you how I am extremely excited about the way that baseball is going. Because I don't feel that way. It doesn't mean that when opening day happens and I get on and I get on Chatterbox Reds that I'm not going to be thrilled to death to be watching the Reds. Right? I still am excited for the season. But I just am frustrated by the way in which we all complain about things that seem unrealistic. We're either complaining about the Dodgers, it's not going to do anything. Or we're complaining about the Reds because they don't go out and spend. And it's like, I hate to say this, but that's not the real problem.
Yeah.
and I'm not trying to shift blame. Now, I have really quickly. I don't know. Is this on the radio?
No, we're done. We're off the radio.
But my thing is, I have to go to a meeting at noon. I didn't know I was doing the show today, which is fine. I woke up this morning and I needed to pinch hit or whatever. That's fine. So I'm gonna have to run here in a second.
All right.
We obviously got into a scuffle the other day.
Correct.
It was pretty one-sided.
It was a one-sided.
It was a one-sided scuffle.
It was. I don't know.
I think it was a
I think
one-sided.
Elliot said, "Hey Trace, I'll bet you $100," and you said, "How about you sleep in the office for 4 days?"
That's what it was, and that's
That's
okay.
exactly how it happened.
I'm willing to play. I think we agreed to 250 for the.
That was the number.
I think 250 was the agreed upon.
So 250 if I don't do
72
it.
hours.
Yeah.
250 if I don't do it. If I do it.
72
And I have to
hours.
spend a weekend in the
72
office,
hours.
and I have to stream it. So that's what's going on today. Roughly around 1 o'clock, correct?
Following dial-in.
Roughly around 1 o'clock. We'll get it set up. You'll be there, so you don't think
I'll
it's
be,
rigged.
I'll be in. I'll be there.
I'll tell you what I'll also do. I don't know if people care to do it or not.
I also get to pick the hole for the record.
You get to pick the hole. Then I get to pick the yardage. Then I get to pick the tee.
You can because you could have been practicing on whatever hole you
That's
want.
fine. I'm just saying though, if you pick a hole, I'm not hitting like 200 yards.
No, we
shots.
determined the yardage already.
I already
The
determined the
yeah.
yardage. So it's 110. It's like 100 to 110, 115, somewhere around there. You'll be able to use a pitching wedge.
Okay, not to get technical, but I'm not going to be hitting like a 110 that's got an uphill 40 yards where I have to hit it 140 to get to the green, even though it's a 100-yard shot.
you might
Is this
if
the
he picks
bull?
that hole.
Is
That's
this
100
is this
100
the-
yards. That's 100
Is this the
yards.
bullshit? This is the
Yeah,
bullshit.
yeah.
Okay, I see. So
No. This
So
is
wait a minute.
That's 100 yards. I'll tell you what. I will
100
make it-
yards flat or less.
Done. Deal.
Okay, fine.
That'll happen roughly around 1 o'clock. That'll be streamed on YouTube to everybody, so everybody can watch that
Yeah.
one.
Before that, watch dialed in.
And we have dialed in before that,
Yep.
immediately following this. So we're going to end early. We're going to get dialed in ready. We're going to clip up the radio, send that to Kinner, and fix all
I love how
this.
you're telling everybody what you have to do.
So that's what we got.
Here's the checklist.
Itinerary.
That's what we got going on right now.
Love that.
So I'll see everybody at noon-ish
get lunch?
for dialed in, huh?
You want to go get, since we're telling about our day, you want to go get lunch?
Yeah,
after
we can
this?
get lunch.
All right, cool.
I'll get lunch. So we got noon-ish dialed in here. After that, I'm going to drive to Trace's house, and I think Jacob's going to come with me too on that.
You need help?
Yeah, I need help
Okay.
because I do. No, I'm allowed to heckle.
Sure.
I'm
I don't
like-
care what you do.
I-
He
For
has
the
given
last-
warning that if you don't hit it by the last like 15 minutes, it's going to turn into
I'm just gonna scream.
It's going to get pretty
I'm just
rowdy.
gonna be screaming for 15 minutes.
He's solicited help from some friends in the office.
So that's what we'll do. That's what we'll do. We'll see everybody at noonish for dialed in. Immediately following that, hopefully we can redirect that to the golf stream, which will be available to everybody at 1 o'clock. Again, $250. Trace pays me if he can't do it in an hour. If he does do it, I have to spend 72 hours in the office.
It seems like a fair deal. Man.
Seems like a fair deal.
Seems like I got the raw end of the stick, but that's all right.
Oh, yeah,
We're-
wrong
we're-
end of the stick.
Raw end of the stick. We'll see you guys
How'd
then.
that PUBG stream go?
That's true.
I mean,
That's
this
very
is out.
Yeah,
That's
exactly.
true.
It's out.
He
And
wasn't
they never
complaining
actually
about
won that one. They had to call in a ringer for that one.
He might still.
All right, so here we go. Off the bench. Thank you very much for listening. Good vibes today. Dialed in a bit.